Hello, parents and educators. As you homeschool more through this COVID-19 crisis, are you finding that your students are having more difficulties with reading comprehension or understanding what they're reading? Hi, I'm Lori Oscus, and I'm a literacy consultant and an author of 8 books on teaching reading and writing. I spend a lot of time in schools with students, even good readers, who struggle with reading comprehension. So I want to share with you this wonderful technique that has 4 steps: predict, clarify, question, and summarize. We call it the Fab Four, that you can use just for with any text that your students are reading, just for a few minutes a day. And what you'll see is a big difference in their reading comprehension, especially if you do it consistently between now and the end of the school year. I would like to also mention that the lessons I'm going to share come out of a book called Close Reading with Paired Text that I wrote with a professor named Dr. Tim Rzinski. It can be used at home or at school to help students with this method. But again, you can use it with anything that you already have that your school has provided you with. I'd like to talk about some of the problems that students encounter with reading comprehension. Sometimes they read really quickly, but they don't remember what they read, or they can't answer comprehension questions, or they really don't know how to figure out tricky words, or they read so slowly they forget everything that they've read. So let's get started with Fab Four, and I'll show you how it works. We're basically going to be reading an article together, and you can print it from your packet that the teacher's given you, or something online. You could even use a page out of a textbook if you wanted, and you're going to need a couple of pencils or crayons, different colors, so that the student can underline and mark as you're reading. Also, I want to mention that you're going to be taking turns, that you take a turn and the child takes a turn. That is why it is called, originally the Fab Four is called reciprocal teaching, because it's turn taking with the student and the teacher. So let's get started. The first step is to predict what the article or the story is going to be about. And in this case, it's called Life in the Desert. So I want to have the student look at the title and also look at the picture and also glance at the words. And I like to use my finger like this and say, just glance around and kind of look around. You know, it's what you do when you're standing in line waiting to buy toilet paper and you're scrolling through your phone. You're kind of glancing at articles. You're glancing to get clues. So let's glance. I see the word plants. I see the word animals. I see 10 inches. So I think I'm going to learn, here's the language that's off the bookmark that we're going to be using and that we've provided you with that goes with this lesson. I think we will learn about plants and animals in the desert and how they survive, because I saw those clues. Then you say to the child, what do you think you're going to learn? And they say, well, I think I'm going to learn about the cactus because I see a picture of the cactus. So we make our predictions, and that is our first glance at the text. The second time is not a glance, it's an actual read. And we're going to clarify words as we read, tricky words that we think are difficult. And so when we read, I know you're wondering, well, how am I going to read with my child? My child, this might be too hard for them to read, or they're reluctant to read, or they're still, struggling with reading. So let the child choose. These are some of the choices we have. We can take turns. I read a paragraph, you read a paragraph. I can read the whole thing and you can follow along the first time. You can read it silently yourself, or we can read in unison, where we read together exactly at the same time, kind of like a chant, which is very good for fluency, by the way. So let the child choose. They'll be less reluctant to do it if they choose how it's going to be read and how you're going to read it together. Our purpose for reading this time, since we've already predicted, is to clarify and look for tricky words that would be difficult, that are kind of tricky and difficult to figure out. So I begin reading the first paragraph. One of the most interesting biomes in the world is the desert. Already a tricky word. So I'm going to circle it. It's called biomes. And I'm going to use this language off the bookmark. A tricky word is biomes. We can figure it out by, what are some ways to figure it out? The first way is not to avoid it, but to look through it and sound it out. Bio, the word bio is like biology, right? I know that word. Something about life. And then I'm going to read on and reread the sentence and see how it goes. One of the most interesting biomes in the world is the desert. Oh, I think it means environment. Then the child takes the pen, and when they read their paragraph, the next paragraph, they're going to circle a word. Maybe they're going to pick the word protection and talk about, ooh, there's the word protect in it, and shun, and then reread that some plants such as cactuses have spines useful for protection, and talk about what they think it means. If the child is reluctant to circle a word and they say, I know all the words, I got it, say, well, pick the longest word, pick the trickiest word that would be tricky for a younger child. They buy into that all the time. So we have predicted, we have clarified, and now we're going to read this again. And this time our purpose is to ask questions. And we're going to kind of quiz each other to see if we're paying attention. And we might ask a question. Each person gets to choose what question they want to ask about what part. So I'm going to ask a question about this paragraph. And I might say, how are the spines useful for protection with plants? And the child has to reread the paragraph and I put a question mark next to it. And I underline the sentence that I'm asking the question about. And they have to reread it and figure it out. Then it's the child's turn, and they're going to put a question mark and ask a question about the next paragraph. So when we're done, we've taken turns asking each other questions, and we also might ask a discussion question like, I wonder what it would be like being in the desert, and being, overnight in the desert, and what would it be like? So we can ask all kinds of questions. Good readers do this when they read. It's important for students to ask questions. Last but not least, the fourth time that we read this is going to be a summary. And the student can talk about what they learned, but they need to skim it and read it again. We both do. And then perhaps we're going to use some of these starters. Here's what I learned, my favorite part was, or we might even hold up our hands and say, what are 5 facts we learned about this text? I can only remember 2 things. I better reread. Okay, so at the end of the lesson, you've covered all 4 strategies that good readers use, the Fab Four, and you've taken turns. It's an excellent lesson for improving reading comprehension. Thank you very much. I'm Lori Oskus. I hope you'll watch the next video where I explain how to use the same method with a poem. Thank you.